I could speak all day about why I'm so passionate about this subject, not just because I think it's the right time for it, but also because I do think it'll expand what we believe is to be this wonderful wealth management service industry to greater heights when we really dig deep into this conversation. I love what Gary said about that this is really about people. It's not just about diversity. And I've been saying that this is the human services industry, not the wealth management, industry. With that, we have someone from out of industry to come and explore this conversation with us, building trust on diverse teams. And he is someone that I got to know through some of my startup community. He is an influencer in his own right. He has an amazing audience of folks. And basically, even though his specialty and area of expertise is in diversity, equity, and inclusion, what I think he really is passionate about is driving success and helping people feel that they're at their greatest output on teams and within their efforts, whatever that may be. So his infectious smile, I think you'll notice, is one of his most amazing features. But beyond that, Kemy Joseph is a wonderful world of knowledge. And I'm super excited that after Kemy gives us a wonderful kind of level setting about this conversation, we'll have the chance to dig in with some of our within industry experts to really work through these concepts as it relates to our professions. So with that, Kemy, thank you for being here and take it away.
Oh, thank you, Noel. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Kristen and Chris. Thank you, everybody, who helped put this together. And I also want to say thank you to all of you as advisors. As we do this work and we talk about people work and human work, it's important to understand the impact that you're having with people and their finances. And many of you get that. And if you don't, I just want to say thank you from the highest and lowest levels possible, because I get a chance to work with people in their best and in their worst. And what I see is the conversation around finances can be just as scary as the conversations around diversity. So thank y'all for navigating that. And in this conversation that we're having, I want to help you bring some of that same braveness, creativity, some of that same focus that you bring into navigating the financial world, into navigating this world that is continuing to diversify. So with that being said, I want to make sure I can share my slides and you all can see it. And what's interesting is, even before I dive into the presentation, I for the last 15 years or so, I've had a chance to work with communities all over the world, and sometimes I take for granted the ability to connect with people. And I had one of my mentors coming to observe me doing a training, and oftentimes when I'm doing a training, in the first few minutes, I have to earn people's trust. And especially if I'm there for multiple days, or if I'm working with a team or a client for the course of a year, those first few moments, that first impression makes a big deal. And usually it goes well, right? I'll say like 98% of the time it goes well. And the reason I say I took it for granted is because after doing this training, my mentor pulled me aside and says, Kemy, it's phenomenal how people trust you. I was like, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm likable approach. He was like, no, but you got to give this. And I want you to all pay attention to what he said to me. He said, no one has to trust you. No one has to trust you. We're in this world where we can give people respect and we have to be kind and have to be nice at least. No one has to trust you. And that stuck with me, that I'm grateful that folks like Noel and Sean trusted me to bring me into this conversation. I'm grateful that people give me their trust. And even when we're in Zoom rooms now, I've been on hundreds and hundreds of hours of Zoom calls since March of last year, and people trust me. And I don't take that lightly. And I want to tell you right here at the top, the same things we were doing to build trust offline, we can do online. As we dive into this conversation, it's important that we're identifying what gets in the way of trust. And oftentimes it's our fears. And so I'm coming from an organization that I co-founded called Fears Advantage, where instead of letting the things that we're afraid of push us away from each other, we actually use our fears to fuel extraordinary actions, relationships, and systems. Again, we fuel extraordinary actions, relationships, and systems. I get so fired up thinking about this because there's more fear in the world right now, not less. It's causing more division, not less. Well, we have to be strategic in how we do this. Again, just as strategic as you are, as you're helping people invest, I want you to be as strategic in that way, building these diverse relationships. So as I go into this, I'll say we're only going to focus on relationships today, which is what happens, right? That trust is a vehicle to relationships. The relationships are the actual tangible version of trust in the world. And so what's interesting here is we're focusing on the relationships, and for us, it's focused on building trust, inclusion, and support within organizations. So we can just laser focus in on trust. And I've worked with people, like I said, all over the world, and I find that everybody answers this question slightly differently. Just pop in the chat. How would you finish this phrase? Trust is. How would you finish this phrase? As I start to see some comments come in the chat, the reason I like to start with this phrase is because I've seen that everybody defines it slightly differently. And that's the beautiful piece, is already saying that our definitions of trust are diverse. So by nature of building trust with one another, we're already practicing a version of diversity, equity, inclusion. And for us in our work, we're here to make diversity, equity, inclusion approachable, actionable, and accessible to people. So I want to tell you right now, just in building trust with people one-on-one, or building trust with each individual that you work with, that is a process of diversity, equity, inclusion. It's not just for minorities. Diversity, equity, inclusion is a pathway to building trust, which is the pathway to building relationships. So I see that trust is a hard thing to earn. I see in the chat other things that come to mind when we're talking about trust and finishing this phrase. I want to say that trust is approachable. What's wild to me in this time is I get a chance to work with clients who make millions of dollars and who are running companies that are international, and they're, again, so creative, so powerful when they start talking about building trust with diverse teams, and they freeze up. I imagine many of y'all can relate to that, being capable in other areas of your life but struggling in this one. And I think it's because we're making this conversation unapproachable. We're stigmatizing the conversation. I remember working with one of my clients, and she's running an organization that's growing quickly. And at one point she said to me, I wish I could just like replace my whole team, because they were having trust issues. And she, as a leader, felt like people didn't trust her. They were second guessing her, and it was frustrating to say the least. So she said, I wish I could replace my whole team. I mean, that's one version of approaching trust. I don't recommend that, because then you're seeing trust as something you just throw away. And besides the expense, right? You talked about the business case. Besides the actual expense of what that would cost to replace the team, we are teaching ourselves, if we do it that way, that trust is just something that's expendable. And once we hire somebody, they're automatically going to trust us. And again, working with hundreds of organizations around the world, I'll tell you, you can pay people to be at work. You can pay people to sit down, shut up, and listen to you even, but you can't pay people to trust you. So trust is approachable, and then it requires us to look at our approach and start to ask people, how are we forming trust? What is it that we're doing to actually build trust with our teams? Which brings us to this next point, that trust is actionable. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, tell me a problem that you solved by avoiding it. Please, I'm still on the quest for that answer, to find a problem that we can solve by avoiding it. Right now, we are avoiding a lot. We're avoiding conversations. We're avoiding resolving issues that are happening in the world and happening in our industries, in our organizations, and within our teams. Well, I'll tell you that trust is actionable, because when we start to take action, people see that we are trying and that we actually care about them. Now, when I tell people about taking action, you say, oh, there's so much I gotta do. I say, no, it doesn't have to be as complicated as we think. Back to it being approachable. We don't have to do everything somebody asks us to do, but we have to communicate what we are going to do. And I know that people are afraid of making mistakes. Absolutely, I get it. Again, back to the fear. How do we use that to fuel extraordinary actions, relationships, and systems instead? So we can take imperfect action that says people, hey, I'm willing to meet you right where you're at, and we're going to keep on building this together. So I want you to even think for yourself, what are the actions that people take that inspire you to trust them? And it's simple things like, I said, doing what you said you're going to do, at least a version of it, communicating when things change, asking for help, being that person folks ask for help from. being the kind of leader that people actually want to be around and be supported by. Which kind of brings us into our next point. We were mentioning earlier about the business case, and it's all over the place. We can talk about the business case over and over. So we'll tell you that trust is measurable. We go into organizations and we will assess the levels of trust and safety. And it's wild that we see that about 50% of people do not feel safe in their organization, including those people being the leaders. It blows my mind. So we can measure and we can talk about that business case, how that teams that are less trusting or less engaged, and that's costing organizations money. And I really believe what Simon Sinek says, that high-performing teams have a high level of trust. And we can have that whole conversation. But I'm going to pop that on the side right now. I want you to think about for yourself. Who do you do your best work for? Someone you trust or someone you don't trust? I just spent about an hour writing an email to this group of folks that I just feel like they're going to take it the wrong way. It took me so long to write this email. That to me is a sign of mistrust. There is a cost to mistrust. It's not just the money that we're spending, it's the time and the frustration, the anxiety that we feel when we're trying to communicate. Again, who do you do your best work for? Who do you follow up with often? The people that you trust or the people that you don't trust? And when I say follow up, I'm talking about micromanaging, right? We generally micromanage the people we don't trust. And I don't know about you, but I never enjoyed being micromanaged. That doesn't build trust. That actually erodes it and it causes more frustration. So we can talk about all the high levels of business and what makes a business case. I want to talk about what makes a personal case for trust. And those people who you trust in your life and trust you, it is a completely different experience. And the more relationships that we have that are trusting, the more sense of freedom we have, as well as more sense of thriving that we have, which brings us to this portion. And one of my favorite parts to talk about is that trust is transformational. A lot of times we make trust transactional. Like I said before, I hire you, you automatically trust me, I pay for this. No, trust is much more than the transactions. And trust is either eroding or evolving. It doesn't stay stagnant. Trust is the return on the investment for what you are doing and saying and how you're treating other people around you. So for me, this allows us to kind of expand the definition of trust, that it actually can transform things. So as we heard earlier from Gary, we've been working on this issue within the industry for the last 50 years. This is still part of the process of building that trust and momentum. And so when I look at trust, you can tell that I like acronyms. I want to offer you an acronym for trust here. And when I understood this, it changed so much for me. So I hope that it changes for you too. That trust transforms resistance into understanding, strength, and thriving. So as we kick off the Thrive Institute, I want to show you that trust is that pathway to do it. Right? And notice here that it actually does transform things like resistance. And oftentimes resistance comes from misunderstandings and misinformation. And we have a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of misinformation right now in the world. So we have that resistance in our team. If we avoid it, it just increases. I think it's John Gordon that says, whenever there's a gap of communication, negativity fills the space. So that avoidance just gives more room for negativity to fill that space. So instead of that, we can look at that resistance and transform it into understanding. Notice it does not say agreement. We don't have to agree. The fact that we're diverse, we're not going to agree on everything. That is fine. Getting a better sense of understanding each other. Then we allow diversity to become a strength of ours. We allow our teams to be a strength. We allow these bonds we form to be a strength. And that's how we thrive. We're not sitting here talking about a kumbaya version of Thrive. I imagine you see the people who are on this panel. These folks are folks who believe in it on a deep level, but also believe in it in a practical way. That as we do our work to thrive, as we're providing things like scholarships, as we're having conversations that may make us uncomfortable, but push the boundaries and allow us to grow beyond where we are, we see that our communities can thrive and our world can actually thrive. And this is allowing us to build things like infinite wealth. So it's important here that as you build that skill of trust, that word resistance, right? That's kind of like the least version of it, right? There's also resentment. It can transform resentment. In this world of like really intense racism, trust can transform even racism into understanding, strength, and triumph. Triumph and thriving can go hand in hand. So if you like to win, I'd love for you to type the word win in the chat, because that gives us closer to thriving together. And as we transition here, I will say that there's more what I can talk about. As Noel said, this is just a ground setting or a foundation setting. And I look forward to being a part of more conversations like this, where we can explore the fuel and the extraordinary, the actions and the systems. I will say for right now, I'll leave you when we send a follow-up email. I'll share 19 strategies for building trusting relationships. All you got to do is start with one, but we gave you many, so you can say, okay, this is approachable and actionable. Fantastic. Start with one. We'll promise you start to see the difference. And then for those of you who are wanting to dive deeper into the conversation, I will say that we are also going to send you instant access to a free recording on advancing racial equity in your organization. So that way you can hit the ground running and keep on going. So for now, I'll say thank you so much for your time and for your attention and for your commitment to thriving within the Institute and creating thriving outside of the Institute. Thank you.
Kemy, thank you so much. I just want to give a shout out to the fact that Thrive actually came from Kemy. So our whole initiative was really catalyzed by our relationship with Kemy, his thinking, his work. And so thank you for those 19 actionable items, and we'll look for that. And maybe we can get, folks to write in as to what they've been able to, actually utilize within their teams and keep the conversation going, as you mentioned. Thanks, Kemy.
Thank you so much, Noel. Yeah, bye.
Awesome. So with that, we are going to move on to the portion in which we get to speak to some of our specialists who are from within the field. And we're really lucky today to have 3 very esteemed specialists from FlexShares, RBC, and Merrill Lynch. Before I introduce them, I just wanted to take a moment to say that I love the idea that trust is approachable, actionable, measurable, and transformational. And I just, as an advisor, think about the fact that we're all doing this every day. In order for anyone to become our clients, we have what we call the runway, like the long runway to trust. And for some people, it's very short, and they see us, they like us, they immediately in the first meeting say, I'm really excited to work with you. By the way, are you taking referrals? And that's a great situation. But sometimes it takes a really long time, and reminds me of that, story of the fox and the little prince, where the little prince had to show up every day in the same place, and eventually the fox came out of the hole. And we have clients like that too. But I think any one of us who's been successful knows that every person has a different kind of rhythm, and we have to approach them in a certain way so that they can finally feel that they can trust us, because choosing us to be the steward of their assets and help their entire family is a huge decision. So I say that because I love what Kemy has positioned here. And for a lot of us, we're already doing it. The issue right now is, how do we do that for our teams? How do we build these amazing teams that not just have trust, but engender trust and promote trust to the point where it grows assets? It's our community, our clients can feel that within our organization, trust is the language that we're all speaking. So with that, I want to invite Laura Gregg, Laura Sheely, and Don Smith to come on with us to talk about this wonderful idea. I'm going to moderate, and this is actually a little bit like a hot seat, because they have wonderful knowledge. Laura Gregg has this amazing presentation, has all these statistics. Laura Sheely's got amazing books and resources. Don has notes from the field of doing this for a long time. And so I'm just so glad to have you all here today to just start exploring this idea. I thought I would just start with our own, what did you write when Kemy said trust is? Like, what was the first thing that popped into your head? And go ahead and just raise your hand, because If not, I'll be like a teacher and call on you one at a time. Laura, Greg, please.
I said trust is comfort.
I love that idea. How about you, Laura?
I went to a place of what trust requires. I was thinking about braveness and vulnerability and, transparency, and how all of those things have to exist in order to have trust.
Don, what did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was a great question. It actually stumped me because I hadn't thought of it, but I came up with trust is the ultimate gift. When someone invests trust in you, that's pretty valuable. And so that's how I walked away, that's an ultimate gift that someone shares when you feel the connection of trust.
That sounds perfect, especially because that's the work we do, right? I mean, if we are doing our job right, we are not only giving our all to our clients, but they're giving us that gift back, and it's a very rewarding experience.